You're sitting in your car, windows up, hands at 10 and 2, when the blue and red strobes flood your rearview mirror. Your heart doesn't just pound, it stops. You already know you haven't been drinking, you aren't speeding recklessly, and you have insurance. So why does your mouth go dry? Why does every instinct scream, just be polite, just answer everything, don't make it worse? Here's the question I want you to hold in your mind before we go any further. If a police officer asks you, "Do you know why I stopped you?" what would you actually say? Pause this video for a second and type your honest answer in the comments. Seriously, I'll wait. Because what you just typed might be the single most dangerous sentence you could ever speak to law enforcement. And most people, even smart, law-abiding people, get this completely backwards. Let me take you back to a traffic stop that changed American legal history. April 2002, rural Tennessee. A man named Claude drives home after work. No swerving, no broken taillight, no expired registration. But a deputy pulls him over anyway. The deputy walks up, asks for license and registration, and then says the magic words, "Do you know why I stopped you?" Claude, like most honest people, assumes there must be a good reason. He guesses. He says, "Maybe I drifted out of my lane a little back there." That single sentence, an innocent guess, a cooperative answer, gave the deputy something prosecutors call reasonable suspicion. The stop became legal. A search followed. Drugs were found. Claude went to prison. Not because he committed a crime before the stop, but because he committed a crime inside his own mouth. The Supreme Court later upheld the search. And the legal principle is terrifying. You can give police the probable cause they lack simply by talking. Here's what most people don't understand. When an officer asks, "Do you know why I stopped you?" they are not asking for information. They are not being friendly. They are not curious about your driving. That question is a carefully engineered legal trap. If you say no, you admit nothing. But if you guess, speculate, or apologize, if you say, "I was going a little fast," or "I think my registration is expired," you have just handed the officer a confession to a violation they might not have seen. In many jurisdictions, that verbal admission becomes the legal justification for the entire stop. Without it, the stop could be illegal. With it, your rights start to evaporate. The officer doesn't even need to prove you actually committed that violation. They only need to prove that you said you did. Think about that. Your own words, spoken under pressure, trying to be helpful, can become the single piece of evidence that destroys any motion to suppress. But it gets worse. Because "Do you know why I stopped you?" is just the warm-up. The real danger comes next. Once you answer that question, even with a harmless guess, you have opened a psychological door. You have established a cooperative rhythm. And now the officer will pivot to the question that sends more innocent people to jail than almost any other. "Do you mind if I search your vehicle?" Now pause and really think about this. Have you ever been asked that? Did you say yes because you had nothing to hide? Did you think that refusing would make you look guilty? Did you believe that if you said no, they'd just get a warrant anyway? Almost everyone gets this wrong. The truth is, in the vast majority of traffic stops, without your consent, police cannot search your car. They can't. Not legally. They can look through the windows. They can run a dog around if one happens to be there. They can ask questions, but they cannot open your glove box, your trunk, your backpack, or your center console without a warrant or probable cause. And here's the kicker. If they already had probable cause, they wouldn't be asking for your permission. They would just search. The request for consent is the single clearest signal that they don't have enough evidence to search without you. And yet, according to a 2018 study of traffic stop data from 12 states, nearly 87% of drivers who were asked for consent to search said yes. 87%. They gave away their Fourth Amendment rights for free because they were afraid of seeming rude. Let me tell you about a woman named Sarah, real case. Middle of the day, she's driving her kids to soccer practice. Police pull her over for a license plate light that was allegedly out. She didn't know it was out. The officer asks if he can search the car. Sarah hesitates, but she thinks, "I have nothing illegal. My kids are in the back. If I say no, he'll think I'm hiding something. He might call Child Protective Services. He might make us wait for an hour on the side of the road." So she says yes. The officer finds nothing in the front, nothing in the back, but under the floor mat in the trunk, a mat she didn't even know could lift up, he finds a small baggie of methamphetamine. Not hers, left there by the previous owner who had sold the car 6 months earlier. Sarah had never seen it, but possession doesn't require knowledge in every state. In hers, constructive possession, meaning the drugs were in a place you controlled, was enough to charge her. She spent 3 nights in jail. Her kids watched her get handcuffed. The charges were eventually dropped, but only after $20,000 in legal fees and a year of her life consumed by court dates. All because she said yes to a search. If she had simply said, "Officer, I do not consent to any search," the officer would have had no legal basis to lift that mat. The drugs would have never been found. She would have driven away in 5 minutes. And that's the secret that police don't want you to know. You have the right to remain silent. Not just when you're under arrest. Not just when you're in handcuffs. The moment any law enforcement officer approaches you, on the street, at your door, in your car, you have the right to say, "I'm not answering any questions." But most people have never heard this. They think silence is suspicious. They think refusing to answer is an admission of guilt. That's not just wrong, it's the exact opposite of the law. In 2013, the Supreme Court ruled in Salinas v. Texas that if you're not in custody, you have to explicitly say you're asserting your right to remain silent. Silence alone can be used against you. But the moment you say, "I am exercising my right to remain silent," or "I don't answer questions," that's legally protected. And here's the beautiful part. In a traffic stop, you are not yet in custody. You're detained, but not arrested. So you have the right to refuse to answer the officer's questions. All of them. Do you know why I stopped you? You can say, "I'm not answering questions." Where are you coming from? Same answer. Do you have anything illegal in the car? Same answer. You can be polite. You can say, "Officer, with all due respect, I don't answer questions." And then you hand over your license, registration, and proof of insurance. Because those are not questions. Those are demands for documents that the law requires you to provide. There's a critical difference. You must identify yourself. You must show your license. You must provide registration and insurance. But you do not have to tell the officer where you're going, where you've been, whether you've had anything to drink, whether you know the speed limit, or whether you consent to a search. Now I know what some of you are thinking, but if I refuse to answer, won't the officer get angry? Won't they make things harder for me? Let me be brutally honest with you. Yes, some officers will get annoyed. Some will try to pressure you. Some will say things like, "Why are you being difficult if you have nothing to hide?" Or, "If you refuse to talk, I'll have to call a canine unit, and that could take an hour." This is psychological warfare. It's designed to make you cave. But here's what they won't tell you. Calling a canine unit, waiting for a drug dog, extending the stop beyond the time needed to write a ticket, that can be illegal. In Rodriguez v. United States, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that police cannot extend a traffic stop to conduct a dog sniff without reasonable suspicion of drugs. If you've given them no reason to suspect drugs and they make you wait 20 minutes for a dog, any evidence found after that delay is fruit of the poisonous tree. In plain English, thrown out. So the officer's threat to call a dog is often an empty threat, or if they follow through, they may be violating your constitutional rights. But you only get to challenge that if you have a good lawyer and if you didn't consent to anything. Let me give you a script. Pull over safely. Turn on your interior light if it's dark. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. When the officer approaches, say this. "Good evening, officer. Here is my license and registration. I'm going to remain silent, and I do not consent to any searches." That's it. You don't need to explain why. You don't need to say you're nervous. You don't need to say you know your rights. Just those 2 sentences. Then stop talking. The silence might feel unbearable. It might feel like you're being rude. But remember, the officer is not your friend in this moment. They're not having a conversation with you. They are gathering evidence. Every word you say is a potential exhibit. You are not being impolite by protecting your own freedom. You are being smart. And here's the reality that most lawyers will tell you, but almost no civilians know. In over 2 decades of practicing criminal defense, attorneys will tell you that the majority of cases they win are not won on technicalities or forensic breakthroughs. They are won because the client kept their mouth shut. The cases they lose? those almost always begin with a client who talked themselves into handcuffs. Now, I want to address the question that makes people uncomfortable. What if you actually did something wrong? What if you were speeding? What if you ran a stop sign? What if you have a joint in the center console? Does the same advice apply? Absolutely. More so. If you have committed a crime, even a minor traffic violation, anything you say can and will be used against you. That's not a warning. That's a promise written into the Miranda warning that police don't have to read until you're under arrest. But you don't need to be under arrest to incriminate yourself. You can incriminate yourself during a casual traffic stop. The officer asks, "Do you know why I stopped you?" You say, "I was going a little fast back there." Congratulations, you just admitted to speeding. Even if the officer's radar was broken, even if they pulled over the wrong car, even if you were going exactly the speed limit, your admission is now evidence. And no judge is going to throw that out because you were being polite. So here's the question I want you to really sit with before you click off this video. Why do we instinctively trust law enforcement with our words when the very purpose of those words is to convict us? We trust them because we've been trained to. From childhood, we're taught that police are helpers, that honesty is always the best policy, that only guilty people need lawyers. That's not just naive, it's dangerous. The criminal legal system is not a truth-finding mission. It is an adversarial process. The officer's job is to gather evidence. Your job is to not provide it. That's not obstruction. That's the Constitution. That's the Fifth Amendment, which says you cannot be compelled to be a witness against yourself. That's the Fourth Amendment, which says you have the right to be free from unreasonable searches. Those rights mean nothing if you don't use them, and using them is as simple as closing your mouth. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever been asked a question by police that felt innocent but turned into something else? Have you ever consented to a search and regretted it? Or have you ever remained silent and watched the officer walk away frustrated? Share your story in the comments. Don't use real names, don't admit to anything that could get you in trouble, but tell us what happened. Because the more we talk about this openly, the fewer people will make the same mistakes. And if you're a lawyer, a former officer, or a legal scholar, I want to hear your perspective too. Is there any situation where you should answer, "Do you know why I stopped you?" I'm genuinely curious. Put your thoughts below. Here's what I want you to take away. You are not being rude when you remain silent. You are not acting guilty when you refuse a search. You are not being uncooperative when you decline to answer questions. You are exercising rights that people have gone to the Supreme Court to protect. And every time you give those rights away because you're uncomfortable with a moment of silence, you make it harder for the next person. Because police learn. They know that 87% of people say yes to searches. They know that almost everyone will answer, "Do you know why I stopped you?" with some kind of guess. They rely on your politeness. They count on your fear of seeming suspicious. Do not give them that power. Hand over your documents. Say you're remaining silent. Say you don't consent. Then wait. The silence is yours. Own it. And if the officer asks you one more time, "Do you know why I stopped you?" just look them in the eye, say nothing, and smile. Not because you're hiding something, but because you finally understand that the most dangerous words you can ever speak are the ones you didn't have to say at all. What do you think? Would you actually stay silent if it happened tomorrow? Or would the pressure get to you? Comment below. And if you learned something today, do me a favor. Share this with someone you care about. Because the next person who gets pulled over might be your brother, your best friend, or your kid. And if they know nothing else, let them know this. When the police ask that question, the only winning move is not to play.